We do Afghanistan. Guess who lays the biggest foreign direct investment? There's no question the Chinese are doing our work for us. Copper mine. PLA deaths, 0 in Afghanistan this year, 0 in Iraq this year. I actually want the guy to use it once in a while. This is the process we're going to see time and time again. This is where the breakdowns occur. This is where the illicit networks flourish. You got straight line states, probably drawn by somebody else. Globalization enters the picture. Guess what happens? It's always the most ambitious who want out. They scream, I want a divorce, and then the fun begins. So Slovenia, Croatia declare they want to get rid of their relationship with those losers to the south. Bosnia says, me three, and you got Yugoslavia in the 1990s. See this time and time again. The Kurds, if they had their way, they'd get out of Iraq. Why? They're more ambitious. South Sudan wants to split off from North Sudan. They succeeded. Why? They're more ambitious. Question is how you get past the ethnic cleansing and start to reconnect politically, like what's occurred in the Balkans the last 10 years. We were told that to go there, this fighting would go on forever. Amazingly, it didn't. So how you make this J-curve, as Ian Bremmer calls it, how do you make it happen? I'd like to point out, if you want to jump the chasm, you do so single party statewise. My point is, America gets called in when the downward curve happens, and then the Chinese show up when the upward curve starts to look possible. Right now, the focus of the activity is South Asia. I will tell you the focus going forward is going to be Africa, Africa, Africa. No question about it. We're interested in political military outcomes. They're interested in network economic, highly complementary. The reality is, you're going to see this time and time again, you're going to see more fracturing, remapping of fake states. Bonus time, bonanza time for illicit networks. The key is to create overarching economic multinational unions that connect the middle to the outside. Deal with the bottom billion, which tend to be landlocked interior states. That should not exist, frankly. So a lot of fake states are going to be remapped. Somaliland up next. Half of them have suffered violence on this basis and continue to do so. Some points about the global middle class, which is the good news. Here's my favorite map of America. Do it in terms of countries with equivalent GDPs. I'd like to show this map to give you a sense as to how complex the networks are in the United States. Globalization writ large. You don't have to go very far back in history. Just go see James Mann's movie about Dillinger to realize Dillinger could rob banks in Chicago, go across the state border to Indiana, and go like this, because he was a free man. We had illicit networks like crazy in the United States until we started federalizing the police force. Scorsese's next movie, Leonardo DiCaprio's. Not sure that's going to work. My point is, we compete these rules all the time. They're not the same. We think everybody's got the same election laws until 2000. We discovered Florida does it just a little bit differently. We're constantly having fights. Here's one now on the question of drugs. 30 states moving towards some sort of legalization, decriminalization, medical marijuana. This is the future of your illicit drug problem. In America, we're going to decriminalize it. Hopefully have a better relationship with the rest of the hemisphere on that basis. Because how we treat Colombia is how we treat China. We say to Colombia, I can't stop sucking up all your drugs. Here's some money. Have a civil war. You deal with it. For the Chinese, we say, I can't stop sucking up all your cheap imports. Raise your currency. I don't care if you have 700 million people living at Guatemala prices. That's your problem. America's great at exporting these problems too. My point is, understand all the rules, procedures, everything that came together to make this almost $15 trillion economy happen. Put this package together in the United States, this is 300 million people. Add up those countries, we're talking over 2 billion. That's fairly amazing. So understand, it's all about the extension of connectivity, the extension of rules, accepting that illicit networks are going to take advantage in a frontier integrating age, but understanding time is on your side. Globalization is all about integrating trade by disintegrating production. We've done it for a quarter of a millennium. We're really good at it. Another way to look at this in terms of the big picture, the great divergence that begins around 1800 thanks to colonialization. The West gets a lot richer. The rest have their stuff stolen. This is the have-not we've been sold. It is such a permanent image in our mind that when we put on the illicit networks today, we say this is the future of the world. Mad Max, Escape from New York. I've seen the movie. But this is what happens with globalization. America's gift to the world. The West does its usual rise this century. The rest go up 1,200%. And that's going to take care of most of your problems for you. The Great Convergence. Typically, this is the distribution you want in terms of income. Not too many poor, not too many rich, most people in the middle. You can rule from the left, you can rule from the right, you can rule from the middle. This is the question. Europe got a middle class at the end of the 19th century, came up with some rather extreme answers. Nazism, Bolshevism. We came up with Teddy Roosevelt and lucked out. The world's going to face similar choices. And we're watching Egypt on this curve right now. Trying to locate the happy middle. My point is, when you add up all the problems we face, this is 70 million coming to our side every year. A little bit higher than Al-Qaeda's recruitment target. Just a bit. Another way to look at it. This guy gets us very fixated with his narrative on terrorism. We had no idea what a hedgehog he was until 9/11 happened. Then we get the perfect counter-narrative, perfect vessel, denied president of 2000. Then you get smart guys like Zitty arguing, hey, I can draw a line between these two. My point is, that's a pretty squiggly line. I crank on CO2, I'm not sure illicit networks and terrorists are disappearing on that basis. Because people want to do illegal things, no matter how advanced your economy is. Back to the 5% rule. I say, stay focused on this. Brand this little sucker. Key thing, if you want to make bad stuff go away, doesn't matter whatever it is, illicit networks included, raise income levels. Get to about 3,000, mass violence disappears. Make the journey to about 10,000, you get environmentalism, political pluralism, you get them above 10,000, freeze Icardi's point, you're a democracy, you'll never go back. And you get replacement level fertility. The only limit? 20 grand. It's true the world over. Money buys you happiness until 20 grand. After that, it's cheating on your spouse, midlife crisis, buying a Miata, visiting your kids on the weekend, and seeing the shrink. Just sick. This is basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay? So nothing's really changed. Guy I like to advise everybody to read on global warming, Bjorn Lomborg. Great thing. His argument, mankind does better when it gets warmer, does worse when it gets cooler. Wisconsin, my home state, 1945 had malaria in it. Wisconsin's a hell of a lot warmer now than it was in 1945. There's no malaria. What happened? Incomes went up. So the predictions for global climate change leading to all this mass chaos and an inability to handle it, it all goes away if you raise incomes. So you're not going to get rid of terrorists by yanking on this knob. You will have tremendous challenges in terms of food. If I want to talk about an illicit network for the 21st century, my fears of terrorism, I do not focus on anything other than food and water. Because all food is water that's been boxed up and moved. This is why I make the argument. These are the countries that export grain. North America is the OPEC of grain. We control about 70% of the movable fees. Middle East has us over an oil barrel. We got them over a bread basket. Guess who croaks first on that one? India can barely feed itself. Everybody else imports. Sort of looks like my core gap map. Europeans slacking off. As an American, I instinctively blame the French. I'd like to point out, over here in Asia, 60% of the population, 36% of the water. Over here, 14% of the population, 41% of the water. So guess what's going to be the most important flow of the 21st century? It's going to be water from the Western Hemisphere to East Asia. And it's going to be primarily in the form of food. Put climate change on top of this, look what happens. Much tougher inside the 35-degree box. Easier above. So where we can't grow food now, we can't grow it even more in the future. And where we can, we'll be able to grow it even more in the future. Why this matters: there are two countries that have untapped arable land: Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, so-called Black Sea countries, plus Brazil, the Cerrado. All the water stress scenarios are in here. Why? 80% of your population grows in that box. So is all the religious fundamentalism. So is all the evangelicalism and missionary work. That's the hot zone. Right now, this is what gets transferred across borders. My argument is you can double or triple those percentages in the next 25 years, making the movement of food the most important network on the planet, not energy. This is how you determine who lives or dies. And you will see, it's been argued recently in a great book, The World in 2050, the New North. It's going to be the place where people go to live and where people grow food more and do more extractive industries. Thank you, global warming. And these are nice people: Canadians, Danes, Swedes, Russians. I mean, you get them all drunk. This is a good crowd. Very friendly people. Beats the hell out of some of the other places. My point on the energy and the food, all about supply chains. I'm going to end on this note. Think about where things are consumed versus where they're harvested. Okay, history was energy. Cut down a tree, burn it in the fireplace, not a problem. Now we import hydrocarbons from the other side of the world. And our fixation with terrorism and a lot of other illicit networks connected to that, based on our assumption that if we can't have access to that energy, the global system stops. Food throughout most of history: grow it in the backyard, clean it in the kitchen, eat it, not a problem. Average farm to fork journey today, 1,500 miles. Based on the picture I showed you previously, I think it's going to get a lot longer. So when I talk about distributed energy in the future, we're going to make and consume energy locally a lot more. It's not going to be the big issue in the 21st century. It was in the 20th. But the movement of food is going to be everything. Key indicator here: the people who can't grow it are buying land all over the planet. The Economist calls it the third wave of outsourcing. So what's happened? The entire California disappeared in the last 3 years. Half of African nations are involved with this, including Ethiopia. I'm in southern Ethiopia last summer, adopting a couple girls with my wife. You see a giant amount of farmland covered with plastic tarp along the sides and on top. Then at the end of it, we see a Chinese barracks and a big Chinese flag out front. In a country where there's famine. Absolutely amazing. Daewoo tried to buy half of Madagascar. Half of Madagascar. Then they found out about it and the government fell. The public found out. So this is profound. My point on the whole NBC thing: I understand we did it backwards in terms of history. 19th century of chemistry gets us chemical weapons, World War I. 20th century of nukes gets us nuclear weapons, World War II. 21st century of biology gets us biological weapons. I take that reality, I marry it to that extending network, and there's my problem set. And Al-Qaeda's interest in our food networks, I would argue, based on all the intelligence I've seen, fairly vast. So the securing of supply chains is the ultimate way you're going to make illicit networks reduce. Ultimately. So Walmart is your best friend. My definition of warfare in the 21st century, here's a good one. I don't think the story's true, but just imagine this. Here's U.S. beef exports, 2003. Somebody screams, "mad cow." In 1 year, we lose a million metric tons of our exports. And we have never recovered. Somebody threw the yellow flag in the NASCAR race, and when they pulled the yellow flag back, we lost our position, even though you're not supposed to switch. Brazil now owns South Korean beef market. We don't. You want a definition of messing with people in the future? That's the best way to do it.